To speak during public comment period, please fill out a speaker card and turn them into me, please. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Albany City Council for Monday, November 18th, 2019. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And is Mr. Marty Roseman here? Would you please join me at the podium? Need a roll call? What? Sorry, we didn't do the roll call.
Councilmember Barnes?
Here.
Councilmember Moss?
Here.
Councilmember Pilch?
Present.
Vice Mayor McQuaid? Here. Mayor Nason?
Here. Now, please join me at the podium.
Check, check, check.
This is a presentation of a certificate of recognition. The Albany City Council commends Marty Roseman in recognition of 30 years of dedicated volunteer service delivering Meals on Wheels for the city of Albany. And thank you. Are there any words you'd like to share?
Just a few.
We'd be grateful.
Just a few. Well, I want to thank the council and the city very much for this honor. I just want to be sure that everybody knows that I delivered Meals on Wheels weekly for 30 years indeed on a bicycle. And I mention that not because I want any special honor, but as an example of how people can use alternate transportation, which is so important in many ways that we all know about, but I recommend it. Whatever youth I still retain in my 88th year is because I've been doing that. So I heartily recommend it to anyone. The more you ride, the better off you are. Thank you. And thank you, Madam Secretary.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I hope that this inspires more people to follow in your footsteps. It's really a joy. It's interesting. You make friends. You learn wonderful things about people, and you feel wonderful. So hope we recruit a few more. Thank you.
You bet.
Okay, number 4 on our agenda is a report on action taken in closed session, if any. We gave direction to the staff. Number 5 is the consent calendar. Consent calendar items are considered to be routine by the City Council and will be enacted by one motion. By approval of the consent calendar, the staff recommendations will be adopted unless otherwise modified by the City Council. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a City Council member or a member of the audience requests removal of the items from the consent calendar. Does anyone on the City Council want to pull anything from the consent calendar? I have one, which is 5-7. Does anyone in any member? Yes.
And I'd like to have a question about 5-5.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone in the audience wish to pull an item from the consent calendar? Seeing none, I think we'll go to the question on 5-5.
Okay. This is to accept a donation of $9,800 from the Albany El Cerrito Access Group. Councilmember McQuaid is generously helping us get this. I had a couple questions. So one was, how much does one of these door systems cost? And we don't know that, or we don't really have an idea. And the other question would be, how many of them would we need if we were to do this in all of our, the appropriate doors in the city, at the community center here, et cetera? And if we accept this, does this commit us to then adding this onto our capital project list? So that's.
Sure, those are all great questions. If the council wished to accept the donation, the next step we would do is obtain a cost estimate to answer those exact questions. And given the amount of funding we have, we would make a determination on what we can cover with that amount of funding, or a next phase, and bring that back to the council for consideration once we have that additional information. And we can prioritize facilities or locations that are more straightforward, or those that are in the most high demand. Give us a few different things to think through to make an informed decision.
So I don't like to look a gift horse in the mouth particularly, but, given that these might be more expensive than $9,800 to install one of these, and if we sort of go down that path, it's going to be a sizable commitment of funds. So it's my hesitation about it. I don't know if anyone else feels similarly.
If I could just say that we need to do this, and this is a huge.
Is this an ADA required thing?
Do you want to weigh in on that piece?
It helps with ease of access to certain restroom facilities if the door is too heavy or just awkward for an individual to open. So it does help in certain circumstances, and that's what our goal is. I think that with the amount of funding we have here, again, once we get a cost proposal together, we can identify what our threshold is and put it at a reasonable place where we can identify funding. We wouldn't necessarily overcommit, and we would do that over a phased period of time as funding allows.
But it is not required by ADA, though, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Are we okay on conflict issues with Peggy participating and voting? She's the donor.
Well, I'm not the donor. Albany Oswego Access, a nonprofit corporation, is the donor. I'm just the messenger.
Are you an official in that group or
Yes.
board member?
I mean, I can.
You can
is
probably
it
better recuse yourself.
Okay.
Then.
Okay, sorry. Just,
Ooh, we might be done with the discussion already of that item.
Yeah.
okay.
Or,
This is a consent item. It isn't necessary for Councilmember McQuaid to actually leave the room. She just has to
Okay.
refrain from voting on it.
Okay. I think I would also refrain, not out of objection to this particular gift, but because of my more general concerns about gifts to the city that I've expressed before, and I also have concerns. We accepted a large gift for a senior center van and have not yet followed through, and I'm concerned that we clarify a bit more what we are doing with these gifts. So I'm not opposed at all. I'm grateful and want to see this happen, but I'd like to see us get a little more clarity about gifts to the city.
Do you want to table this, or do you want the remaining three of us to vote? I'm unclear.
Is there, perhaps we should defer it. If, does that?
your hesitation is not my only hesitation is I just am curious as to what this commits us to in the future. And it sounds like this is a really good thing. I don't have a problem with doing it, but there is this idea that, well, we're going to have a little bit of money to do a kind of a much larger project, and it's going to be added on to our, capital project list. So I don't know what the expectation will be in terms of timeline, et cetera.
I don't think we have any hard and fast timelines or obligations. It's a gift of funds to go towards a goal of achieving a project. As you know, in the capital improvement program, there are a number of projects that are unfunded and are in a holding tank until funding is identified. So again, we could time it however it works best for the budgeted funds that we have in CIP.
Sometimes looking a gift horse in the mouth doesn't take too long. Anyway, I'm happy to vote on this tonight.
Me too.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, then,
I think with that explanation, I'm happy also. So.
good. Let's go forward then.
Should we vote for
Wait,
this?
we need to talk about 5-. We won't need a separate, we don't need a separate vote. I will vote for the consent.
We'll need a separate vote because I can't vote.
Oh, you're right, okay.
So do you want to take the
So why
vote
don't we
now?
take a vote on this, on 5-5?
Okay, 5-5.
Yes.
Do we need a motion? I move that we approve 5-5 separately from the other items on the consent calendar.
Second.
Councilmember Barnes?
Yes.
Councilmember Moss?
Yes.
Councilmember Pilch?
Yes.
Vice Mayor McQuaid?
Abstain?
Mayor Nason?
Abstain.
The motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, then 5-7, in discussions, this is a somewhat unusual situation in which the city of Berkeley is requesting an encroachment permit for a fence that will include a section in Albany. And I've had discussions with the representative for the district in Berkeley and with the landowner and with other concerned parties, and I think there's a desire to defer this for somewhat more information to be gathered by all the parties. So I'd like to hear a motion for the consent calendar excluding 5-5, which we've already voted on, and 5-7, which will come back at a later date.
So moved.
Second.
Do we need public comment on the consent?
Do we have any cards for any of the items on the consent calendar? Nobody asked that anything be pulled, but I guess someone could come up with a thought while hearing our discussion. Does anyone wish to comment on the consent calendar? Okay, then let's have a roll call.
Councilmember Barnes?
Yes.
Councilmember Moss?
Yes.
Councilmember Pilch?
Yes.
Vice Mayor McQuaid?
Yes.
Mayor Nason?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, we go to good of the city, public comment. This section is for persons desiring to address the city council on an item that is not on the agenda. Please note that city policy limits each speaker up to 3 minutes, and that may be reduced depending on the number of speakers. The Brown Act limits the city council's ability to take and/or discuss items that are not on the agenda. Therefore, such items are normally referred to staff for comment or to a future agenda. If all persons wishing to speak on an item are asked to fill out speaker cards and provide them to the city clerk. Does anyone have, do we have any speaker cards on items not on the agenda? We have one speaker. Please come up.
Okay. Thank you. Good evening. Doug Donaldson, resident of Albany. I have 2 items tonight, if I could. The first one is I want to report that there is a burrowing owl down at the plateau this winter. And I can't say it's easy to see because it really is hard to see. And I've been down a couple of times and can't always find it. And when I do, it's way in the middle out there, and even with really good binoculars and where you know when you're looking, it's hard to find. But it is residing there, and maybe it'll move to a more visible location. I kind of hope so, because it's certainly not any kind of education bird that the docents for the Audubon Society can use at this time. There's also another burrowing owl over at the dog park. that is on the riprap, near the water, and is really quite visible. But it has been moving around a couple of times too. And no burrowing owls this year so far at Cesar Chavez Park in Berkeley. We haven't found any. So that's one thing. The other thing I want to notice is that daylight savings has come and gone, and now we have our evening rush hour after 5:30, and it's dark out. I talked to you last year about remembering the old Wear White at Night campaigns from the 1950s. It's hard to see pedestrians at night, and everybody's buying dark clothes these days. And so I think it'd be good for Albany to have an equivalent Wear White at Night program, maybe something like, walking dark after dark, don't do it, or something. Someone could come up with a slogan anyway. I'm wearing my reflective biking jacket just as something, because my vest is just dark. Jeans are dark, we're all dark, and everybody's dark after dark, and we shouldn't be. So be safe. It's really hard to see some of the pedestrians on Solano. And you have a lot of cars going up and down now with the rush hour after dark. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Item later.
Okay,
I need a card, though.
they're in the back.
Okay, so no more, do I take it that she's commenting on an agenda item?
Right.
Correct, okay. No other item, nobody else wants to speak on an item not on the agenda. Okay, then we'll move forward to council subcommittee reports, council member reports on appointed representation of Albany and other meetings and events. And number one is the City Council Subcommittee on the closure of Alta Bates Hospital. And I just wanted to report that there have been two forums, which both Vice Mayor McQuaid and I, as members of the subcommittee, did attend. One was in Richmond and is part of an effort entitled An Emergency Room for Richmond. At least some of the participants in that believe in getting a change in state law to allow freestanding emergency rooms, but there are quite a few people who oppose that, and it's presently illegal. We also had a forum in El Cerrito that was put together by the Alta Bates Task Force, on which Vice Mayor McQuaid and I participate. And that effort is, of course, focused on keeping Alta Bates open, but we have no indication that that is that the plan to close the hospital has changed. So we continue to work in the direction of supporting keeping Alta Bates Hospital open. Vice Mayor McQuaid, do you have anything to add to the report? No. Okay. Then we'll move on to City Council appointed.
Just a note that I think the bulb subcommittee report might be getting due, quarterly due, so I'd love to have a report on that.
Next on the rotation. We'll do it at our first meeting in December. Thank you. The City Council appointed representation of Albany. I submitted a written report. Are there any oral reports that anyone would like to make?
I have one.
Okay.
I sit on the Alameda County Housing Commission, and I was a bit late getting the reports, but they are on the dais, and there's some in the back. And we met last week, and the two things that I thought were of interest to us is the longtime executive director will be leaving with her last day, March 30th. There is a recruitment firm that's been hired to shepherd this process, and I've volunteered to serve on the committee to interview the new candidates. And I also included here the special programs that HACA provides in just a sort of outline. We think of it as just simply, if we think of it at all, we think of it just as a housing organization, but there's actually a lot more that that goes into it. And so I just thought you might be interested in that. So it's just on your report. And that's all I have.
Very good. Thank you for the very comprehensive report. And I should actually supplement my written report with an oral item because I prepared that report before it was publicly announced that the new executive officer for the Alameda County Transportation Committee will be, will be Tess Langell, who has been serving as the assistant executive director, I believe is her title. So she will be the chief officer, and this is one of our own, yes. We're very pleased. Any other reports on meetings as appointed representatives for Albany? Okay, then how about more generally, meetings and events? Anything to report? Councilmember Pilch?
Sure, yeah. I met with League of California Cities organized a meeting with some fellow council members in the area to talk about environmental issues, and the League's environmental lobbyist was present to hear our environmental concerns. And I also went to the opening of the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge pedestrian and bicycle path. That was a wonderful event. And went to the Shui Sindel art exhibit, and it was art of photographs of Africa. Very nice event. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor McQuaid, do you have?
Yeah, I've got a few things. There was a chamber mixer, as the mayor mentioned. We had 2 forums on Altabates. I participated in the Climate Mayors Conference call. The Mayors Conference last week was in Oakland. We also had a tour of the compassionate communities, I think they called them. They're the tough sheds that Mayor Schaff arranged for us. We kicked off United Against Hate Week last night with an event at Belmont Village, and I attended a press conference this morning on it. I also attended a Cal OES Office of Emergency Services workshop via Facebook this morning. I think next time I'll go to Sacramento. It was a bit sketchy on Facebook. A good try, but it kept stopping and it wasn't real good. And also, the mayor and I represented us at the LAFCO meeting last week. Okay.
Okay. Council member, okay. You know, I did attend one additional meeting since I submitted my report, but I will, a couple of, I don't think we talked about LAFCO. A couple of meetings, and I will do written reports, but one was, for the next meeting, we'll do written reports, but one of those meetings was the Recycling Board and Waste Management Agency. Very interesting discussion of options for Alameda County with regard to ordinances on plastic foodware in the restaurant industry. And the decision to be made is between a county-wide ordinance or the preparation of a model ordinance that cities can take and customize to their needs. And there is ongoing discussion of that, but the staff will be working on an agenda. So one way or another, we will be seeing something come out from the county about plastic food items. The other that was not yet mentioned was the Local Agency Formation Commission, which is seeking to annex Albany to the Alameda County Mosquito Abatement District. Albany currently gets its services from Alameda County Vector Control, which seems a more integrated approach that looks at all different disease vectors rather than mosquitoes in isolation. But we will certainly come back to that another day. Councilmember Barnes, did you want to make any reports? Okay, then let's go to the city manager report.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple quick items for you. You may have heard that PG&E is planning another PSPS event this week. At this point in time, again, Albany is not considered to be in the shut-off area. However, we could receive other impacts based on our neighbors having no power. It's also a red flag warning coinciding with that event, both Wednesday and Thursday of this week, so please be aware of that. And windy conditions, dry, windy conditions. The Albany Hill Access Improvement Project is well underway, and they have completed the concrete work associated with the accessible pathway from Taft to the summit, and they are now focusing on the path improvements between Taft, Jackson, and Madison. There have been some questions that have come up regarding the monarch butterfly potential impacts to the area. I want to reiterate that we have retained Creekside Science, Dr. Stuart Weiss, who is a monarch butterfly expert. We will be posting his inspection reports to our website as he is retained throughout the length of this project. We are also working through our sidewalk repair projects. A badly deteriorated sidewalk along Stanage and Solano has been fixed, and appreciate the adjacent property owner's patience as we worked through that major project. Sandbags will be available starting this weekend. We had a short delay due to the to the warm, windy conditions, but they are now available. And again, you can obtain your bags for the sand at our fire department. Around the corner from City Hall, at 900 block of Adams Street, we've watched East Bay Mud do a lengthy project of a water main replacement. They're currently working on installing a new hydrant on the street, so we hope that they're almost done. Staff is coordinating with them to make sure emergency access and improvements are done properly. A reminder, as Thanksgiving is coming up, Waste Management will be on their holiday collection schedule. This means that there will be no service on Thanksgiving, November 28th, and collection will resume on Friday and Saturday to pick up for the lost day there. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Regarding the sandbags, will there be a location at Ocean View as before with people being able to have their sandbags filled for them if they're unable to do it?
I need to ask our neighborhood services manager. I anticipate that we'll have those events again. I don't see them scheduled quite yet, though.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, then we will move on. We have no presentation tonight, so we move on to item 10, a public hearing. May we have a staff report, please?
Good evening, Mayor Nason and members of the council. I'm Jean Iceberg, a consulting planner. You may recall that we met about this item on October 21st. So this is an action item requesting that you consider ordinance amendments to Chapter 14 to add a section on small wireless facilities in the public right-of-way and a resolution adopting conditions of approval and submittal requirements. So you may recall at that October 21st meeting, staff recommended that the council move to continue the item to tonight's meeting to take into account public comment received, including from AT&T. Staff gave a presentation and the council moved to continue the item. We took public comment at that time. I'm not going to repeat the background presentation from last time. I'm happy to answer any questions afterwards, but I will give a brief summary of the project and then go into some details about the ordinance itself. So the draft ordinance responds to new federal regulations that require review of small wireless facilities in the public right-of-way within a specified timeline. So the way it is now, the zoning ordinance regulates small wireless facilities on private property, but essentially right now there are no regulations beyond coming in for an encroachment permit about facilities in the public right-of-way. Because the ordinance is only amending Chapter 14, which pertains to the public right-of-way, the amendments only require review by the City Council. So the Planning Commission does not have purview over amendments to this section. The ordinance aims to both respond to federal requirements and clarify expectations for the applicant, for staff, for decision makers, and community members. And you can think about the ordinance addressing 3 key areas of permitting: purpose and definitions relating to the applicability of the ordinance, the procedures, including the application requirements, noticing, and the approval process, and then the criteria for review, including design criteria, operations, maintenance, removal of a facility, and required findings. I'm just going to address the items that are in bold on the screen. So first, in terms of application requirements, the city already has submittal requirements for encroachment permits. This adds a layer of specificity for facilities, wireless facilities in the public right-of-way, including photo simulations to show what the facilities would look like in context, a survey to acknowledge all the surrounding trees, utilities, other infrastructure, and a compliance report certifying that the proposed amendments, the proposed antennas and any co-located facilities comply with radio frequency exposure standards. The staff recommends the following the following fees that are on the screen. These are what federal law calls safe harbor fees that don't require a separate nexus study. And then lastly, the review timelines are per federal law, which calls them shot clocks, and essentially the city has 60 days to review a project on an existing pole that's been an existing pole, and 90 days for a facility on a new pole. Several levels of review for an encroachment permit. First, zoning clearance by planning staff for replacement of existing facilities on an approved structure. Second level of review would be if a wireless facility is proposed for co-location on an existing pole that's been previously approved as a wireless site. That would also be ministerial review by staff. And then anything else, all other applications would be reviewed by the Planning Commission. So that could be a new facility on a new pole. Regardless of the level of review, everything requires an encroachment permit and everything requires a building permit and could be appealable to the City Council. In terms of the criteria for review, you'll see that the ordinance cross-references to the design criteria and operations regulations that have already been adopted in the zoning ordinance in Chapter 20. So where it makes sense, we're suggesting the same criteria in terms of design and aesthetics that's regulated on a private property as in the public right-of-way. And then there's some additional standards that are proposed. So the existing ordinance that's cross-referenced in Chapter 20 talks about non-reflective finishings, painting to minimize visibility, prohibiting support structures, guy wires, and including anti-climbing measures. Now, additionally, we're recommending in the draft ordinance that antennas and accessory equipment in the public right-of-way be located in shrouded enclosures. The ordinance also expresses a preference for antennas mounted on tops of poles, like you can see in the image on the screen, rather than a sidearm mounted facility. Notably, the design criteria do not regulate geographic location. Currently, Chapter 20 includes provisions that regulate location, but in review with the city attorney, staffs determined that these provisions are inconsistent with federal law, and therefore they cannot be enforced.
I'm sorry, could you say that very last bit again about which parts can't be enforced?
So right now, the Chapter 20 ordinance, which regulates small wireless facilities on private property, does have a separation requirement to residential zones and uses and to schools. And our interpretation of federal law is that the city cannot regulate that type of geographic location. And so that's not currently being enforced by the city.
Okay, thank you.
So I mentioned the ordinance adds some new standards that would just pertain to small facilities in the public right-of-way, a height limit of 6 feet above the existing structure. The ordinance expresses a preference for antennas, I mentioned this, located on the tops of poles. Although the antenna needs to be above ground, the provision requires undergrounding of all equipment in locations where utilities are undergrounded, and that includes where undergrounding projects are planned going forward. The ordinance places limits on lights and electric meters to reduce the amount of visual clutter. prevents street trees from being trimmed or damaged by new facilities installed, prohibits encroachments onto private property, and prohibits obstructions to public infrastructure. The ordinance again cross-references to Chapter 20 in terms of operations and maintenance, including requiring signage, including contact information on the facilities, standards around cleanliness, maintaining facilities in good repair, and then also to do spot checks of radio frequency thresholds if there are concerns. The ordinance also includes lease agreements for city-owned structures and a new requirement for post-installation certification to make sure that those radio frequency limits are being met. And then lastly, a revocation process if there are violations to the terms of the permit. The staff report goes through point by point, responding to the public comment that was received at the last meeting. And we did receive some additional comments today, which I believe were all emailed to the council. So again, this just reiterates the staff recommendation. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Are there any questions from the council? Councilmember Barnes.
Yeah, I don't want to get into the sordid sort of political background of, how the FCC sort of stepped in on these rules, but my recollection was that state attorney generals were suing the FCC over some aspects of this. So, my goal would be, and my suggestion would, and I'm sure you followed, is to just maintain as much local government discretion as possible, subject to constraints that the city attorney would identify. But where are we at with the attorney general's lawsuit, and how are we going to, integrate those changes if any come out of that process?
So I can start and then. Oh.
I actually don't know anything about that.
Okay. Well, I know. So this is what I've expressed is the ruling as we know it. It is under litigation right now, so we don't know what's going to happen from here. The ordinance that we've prepared is attempting to implement the ruling that was put out by the FCC.
If it turns out as a result of a court decision or some regulatory change that some greater discretion is granted to local authorities, then we could come back and amend the ordinance to take advantage of that.
Okay, Councilmember Moss, any questions?
Moss? Yeah. So just to be clear, it's your opinion that we can't say that if you're going to go in the public right of way, it can only be in a commercial area or, a non-residential area. But under current federal guidelines, are we allowed to say no to public right of way completely? Is that even a conceivable answer? No. So.
The federal law reads that cities can't effectively preclude deployment of this technology, and the FCC guidance has taken a very broad interpretation of that, and so any geographic limitation would be seen as in violation of federal law.
That's what I thought, but I just wanted to confirm that. Yeah.
Okay. Councilmember Pilch, any questions?
Yes. Could you go back again to the item about P&Z not having purview over this item? And could you explain that one more time?
Sure. So my understanding of the city's regulations, although the Planning Commission reviews and recommends amendments to Chapter 20, they do not to Chapter 14. Do I have that correct? Which pertains to public right-of-way.
Wow.
This isn't part of the zoning ordinance, so.
Right.
Sorry.
It's not part of the zoning ordinance, so it hasn't gone before the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Okay.
But they would be responsible for interpreting it for the purposes of reviewing an application for a facility on a new pole in the public right-of-way.
So they would have to interpret it, but they're not, it's not even, hasn't even been brought to them, as I understand, as an informational item yet.
Right.
I find that, okay. Do we have to do this? Are we required by law to have a section in our code for this?
Okay, well, so right now, someone could come in with an application for a small wireless facility in the public right-of-way, and they would need an encroachment permit in order to do so, but there are no regulations that the city could stand on in terms of how to regulate those. So there is a submittal requirements checklist for an encroachment permit. It doesn't quite pertain to, it requires a soils report. It doesn't quite pertain to small wireless facilities. So it could happen, but there are no,
But there's federal regulations about that, which we could refer to.
And the city would be still be subject to the shot clock timelines to review.
Mm-hmm. So some of this is restating of federal rules, and some of this is Albany's own desires.
Right, in an
like
effort
the
to
enclosure.
control what we are permitted to control.
Okay.
Around operations, around maintenance, and around design.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I mean, right now, if an application were to come in, the processing would default to the federal regulations. We effectively, with the absence of a process, don't have much in the way of control that, or conditions that we can impose. So the intent with this is to establish a process that we can follow that puts the applicant on notice as to the city's expectations for the submittal requirements, the conditions of approval, so on and so forth, and working within federal framework, but conforming to some extent to local regulations.
Okay. Thank you. That makes sense. And we received, I think city manager said that the staff would be prepared to speak to the newest AT&T letter. I think that would be good to, that would be my question, is how do you respond to that letter? But let me see if I have one more easy one before that. Well, I guess I would like staff to respond to that letter and to what discretion we do have, because we also do have other correspondence indicating that other cities have implemented, in the opinion of the correspondent, stronger ordinances. So if staff could speak to both those items, that'd be great.
Sure.
So I've read through the correspondence, and I think it's important for the council to understand kind of two distinctions with this. What we're bringing before you tonight is an encroachment permit process through Chapter 14. What we have on the books in Chapter 20 is, for all intents and purposes, a telecommunications ordinance. And what I read through that correspondence is that it references telecommunications ordinances. So that's a much broader brushstroke of looking at zoning compliance, enforcing development standards, and assigning some level of discretion through a review process, conditional use permits, design review, that sort of thing.
Oh, so that's, you're referring to private property rather than public right-of-way?
Right,
Okay.
right.
All right. That's the correspondence, and then the AT&T letter.
Yes, so, and I may look to Craig on some of this. What might be easiest is to just work backwards, because I think the last 2 points in the letter are actually kind of the easiest, and then it gets a little more involved. With respect to their notion on appeals, we have accounted for that within the time frame of 60 days. So we are fully aware of that requirement, and we can make that work within the shot clock requirements. I don't think that we need to modify anything in the draft. That's just kind of an internal procedure of how we process those applications. With respect to point number 4, electric meters, we had modified the language really to encourage that where practical, understanding that there may be a circumstance where that may not be feasible. So we've modified the language to strongly encourage. With respect to concealment, I think the city still does have some discretion of enforcing objective design standards. So I think unless Craig has something to say, I think we're still okay in enforcing that because what we're looking at is fairly prescriptive and it's a performance standard for those facilities. I think similarly, design criteria fits in that same realm. My understanding is as long as we make it objective, that's something that we have local control over. And lastly, with respect to the first point of public notification, not having a notification procedure, I don't think would make anyone in this room feel comfortable. To their point, there may be some issue with it, but I think just in the purpose of promoting transparency, it is appropriate to have some sort of notification where a facility is proposed.
And did the city attorney have concur with these?
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you. I thank you very much, Ann, and I think that does it for my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor McQuaid, any questions?
Yeah, I have a couple. Regarding the fees, I noticed that you suggested changing the fees with the new fee schedule, which I believe is July 1st. Just roughly how much of a change is it and why are we not doing it now?
So we are taking in fees right now. The current fee schedule is a fee of $146 plus staff time beyond 2 hours, as estimated by staff. And the problem is it doesn't represent a clear amount because there's no sort of upper limit. And so that's basically what federal law says. It needs to be clear and reasonable. And so we could go ahead and do we may end up right now be collecting more than that because perhaps it takes staff 10 hours and it's, could be more than what the proposal is here in terms of the fee. But if we wanted to propose something more than what these safe harbor estimates allow, we would need to go through the process of doing a nexus study.
Okay, but I'm still not sure why you wouldn't.
Oh, why not just the fees now? I don't have a.
There's no reason that we can. It would be just an update of the master fee schedule at an upcoming council meeting.
Okay, thank you. And my other question is, just roughly, when did the federal law change? And the reason I'm asking is, in looking at some of the previous emails we had with cities with good, or people like the ordinances, they seem to be older. And I'm wondering if those cities have updated their ordinances or policies to reflect the newer federal law.
Yeah, that's a good point. So this ruling is effective as of January 14th, 2019. So
That's what I thought, okay.
Yeah. I can't say that those communities have already updated, but
Right.
perhaps not.
Thank you.
Okay. No other questions from council. We'll turn to public comment. Do we have cards? We do. Okay.
If you can line up 3 at a time, Signig Matson, Wisteria Stock, and Nori Hudson.
Good evening, Council. Signe Matson, longtime Albany resident since 1970. I would appeal to you to pay attention to the several people who have sent you the key points for telecom ordinances. It seems to me that the recommendations from the staff in terms of what's legal and not legal, and in terms of some of the other things, seems to indicate to me that your staff really needs to review the abundance of material about the dangers of 5G and other electromagnetic and radio frequency radiation. You rely on your staff to give you information to make intelligent decisions that serve the people in your community. And so I don't know how you could get your staff up to speed on these dangers so that their recommendations to you reflect an understanding of those dangers. Also, to the fact that there are court cases in process now against the FCC and changing the FCC regulations. There are also a group of mayors who are suing about the theft of local control, and I would encourage you to stand with the people who recognize the dangers and are refusing to bow down to the telecom industry. Let's see. Okay. Especially the FCC prohibition of citing health consequences. That's in flux, and when that changes. So whatever you do now, whatever agreements you make with the telecom companies, you've got to make them provisional so that when these restrictions change, you can void your agreements.
Thank you.
And
good evening, City Council. I'm Wisteria Stock, and I oppose the 5G close proximity small cell wireless facilities. And one of the, I don't want them in the residential areas. And I am concerned of fire risk and violation of labor safety standards. And I don't want them around children, schools, libraries, or parks. And I think if there's what's the rush? Can't we slow down? Why is it so necessary to vote on it now?
Thank you.
After Nori would be Stephanie Thomas.
Hi, I'm Nori Hudson. I live in Albany, and I'm grateful to have the chance to talk with you. I'm representing somebody who has been electrochemically harmed. She was a client of mine. I'm a nutrition consultant, and she came to me with severe fatigue, headaches, and incredible malaise. And they occurred usually around the time of going near areas where there were high antennae and cell phone towers. So I'm reading her testimony here. She wanted me to bring it. So I'm reading it for her. My name is Connie Anderson. I'm 50 years old and have many friends at Albany and many Albany businesses I frequent. I have severe electromagnetic hypersensitivity for 2.5 years and has totally derailed my life. I can no longer work on a computer long enough to work even remotely. I was recently approved for federal disability for this condition. That was just this last month. I'm unable to read this public comment in person as I would like to because the ambient level of radio frequency radiation in this place here is intolerably high due to multiple cell phone antennae installed on buildings here. And it's so high that I no longer drive down San Pablo through the intersection at Marin to avoid being stuck in a red light there. If Albany approves 5G technology, putting antennae on every telephone pole or every third to fifth house, at most every third of a mile, many Albany businesses will be deprived of my support. My world is slowly closing in on me. I anticipate a time in the near future when I will be effectively housebound. It is even possible to have to move out of my house and become an EMF refugee, living a nomadic life in parks, a fate that has already befallen many people I know who have developed electrical sensitivity. 5G rollout will be an egregious violation of access rights granted to all disabled citizens thanks to the American Disabilities Act. Due to existing cell antenna and towers, access barriers already abound me, and their numbers will increase exponentially if the dense antenna network required by 5G technology is installed. By the way, you can go online, antenna search, and find out the trees that are around us here. If this happens, I will fight for my rights and bring suits against every city in this area that I frequent that is approved of antennae that prevent me from accessing public rights of way and freely navigated streets and businesses. Many cities in California are passing very restrictive telecom ordinances and at least keeping it out of residential neighborhoods. I urge you to do the right thing and keep 5G technology out of Albany. For some of us, it will literally be a matter of life or death. Sorry, I guess that's the end of it.
You've got a few more seconds if you could wrap it up.
Just want to say the FCC safety regulations are old. They're from 1996, and they refuse to go further.
Thank you.
Hello, council people and city officials. I live in Berkeley, but a stone's throw from Albany, and I'm in Albany usually a couple times a week with medical appointments or classes at the center or the community gardens. And I learned about the proposed changes to take away protections of residential areas from cell towers. So, and I urge you to not do this right now. I looked at the mission statement from Albany. I kind of know it by osmosis because, coming down your streets, but they want to maintain a small town ambiance, providing a safe and healthy, sustainable environment. And I know there are challenges with the FCC current rules and regulations that are rolling out, although, of course, there are court challenges against these in place at the moment. And many cities, has been expressed, are acting within the law to put various restrictions to slow this down or to make it less easy to proliferate these facilities. So I don't know if I'll give you all the details on that, but there's Ninth Circuit Court one that's maybe settled by March, and there's one that that is them challenging the possibility of needing an environmental review. That's the DC court, and the interpretation of that's still being discussed. But some of the things that happen, if all the rollout comes at the speed that some would like it, there's safety factors. Besides, losing the small town ambience when you have all these proliferation of devices on a pole. Maybe some would be undergrounded, but there are many in Berkeley that are like several of them on a pole, and then the antenna's way on the top. And sometimes, and these can be converted to 5G. There might be 4G at this moment. But anyway, if these are all up and down the streets and making noises, the quiet enjoyment of a person's home is threatened. The property values, there are studies that they go down 20 to 30%. And access issues, has been mentioned, the ADA, you cannot necessarily walk down the street if there's devices are there. Children playing out there, if these devices are hidden, how would a mom know not to let her kids play out there or walk down the street to the store? Is that the time, or is that 10 seconds?
We have a few more seconds.
Oh, okay. Loss of viability in community gardens. I think I passed out things about the effect on the bees and many other things, weather prediction, so on.
Thank you. Do we have any more speakers? Please come on up.
Hi, I'm Nadia Vitko, an Albany resident, and I guess I just want to put out there, I don't understand all of the FCC regulations and what the limitations are, but I do know that I have two small children, and one is 2 and one is 5, and I am terrified of cellular radiation. I try and leave my cell phone as far away from us as possible. I still have it, so, there it goes. But I don't know what the city's limitations are, but I would encourage you to be as prudent as possible. I know that many of us move here for our children. A lot of schools, a lot of young kids, that's why we're here. That's one of the things, we love the city, and we love that everybody cares so much, and we love that it's such a great community. And I think a lot of people make sacrifices to live here because it's a great place for children, and I would like it to stay that way. I don't want things that are a danger to them, especially when they're not in our visibility or in our, if it's another thing that we have to look out for that we don't realize. It's a little scary. Anyways, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm a recent Albany resident. My name is Michael Alonso Bustillo Sakai. And so the first thing I wanted to bring up is, have there been any kind of considerations with these small cellular facilities and how really they can work to expand the surveillance state? It seems that the federal government is not allowing the city or any kind of non-federal organization to, ban its placement in the public right away. And the airwaves, according to the FEC, are property of the American people, and I just think that it's should be within the priorities of the city government, of you all here, to make sure that these don't get built in the city. 5G, increased electromagnetic radiation going through the air. Haven't been enough health studies as to whether or not that is safe. And honestly, I wouldn't like to have it here. I share the same concerns as the people who came up here bravely previously. And yeah, I wish you would all table the vote on passing this ordinance. And yeah, I feel like having a lot of this electromagnetic radiation in the air is very similar to the marine pollution from ships, going across the ocean, how that affects whales and the way whales communicate and their brains, and who knows how similar that could be to our own physiology as mammals in this fluid of air. Yeah, thank you for listening.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Then I will close the public comment period and take it back to council. Does anyone have further questions or comments on this issue? Councilmember Barnes.
So after tonight, over the next few years, say, until perhaps there's a different FCC and a different president in DC, what is, or are there plans to review not this encroachment permit aspect, but the telecommunications aspect? Are we going to have a hearing on a broader set of issues in the next few years?
Well, we are going to need to make similar changes to Chapter 20, to the zoning ordinance. So, this ordinance is adding new regulations. It's actually, we still have the geographic location regulations on the books, as I mentioned. It's just cannot be enforced right now, or it's not being enforced right now. But we are going to need to revisit the zoning ordinance to bring it into compliance with federal ruling.
Okay, and that will go through P&Z.
That will go through P&Z. And then I can't really speak to the next administration, and
All right. We'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, but I think a lot of this law comes from the cellular companies too. In addition to the government, it's coming from these wireless providers, and frankly, it's coming from all of us placing demands on the network.
Okay, well, this is an issue I followed for many, many years, and I've remained in touch with some of the folks at UC Berkeley, where I was a science editor. Joel Moskowitz, in particular, has become a national figure. I used to go to meetings with Joel many years ago. I have real doubts about 5G because part of the issue is, personally, I don't need it because I have a SonicNet high-speed 1 gigabit fiber optic cable into my house, and I text my son over WhatsApp, and that's pretty much all I need. I don't really see a burning need for people to be able to stream high-definition movies sitting in front of my house in their cars, which is what those 5G antennas will allow them to do. You know, I can already do that. But for the most part, our hands are tied. I think the FCC we have now is particularly bad, not only on this issue, but other issues like internet access. What's the jargon? I'm blanking on it.
The internet.
Net neutrality, thank you. So that there's a lot of improvements that could be made at the federal level. I think we have to be careful to monitor those changes, to pay attention to the lawsuits, and as I said before, to maintain as much local government flexibility as we can and push for that short of having to get tied up in lawsuits. You know, I'm a little disappointed. There was a time in Albany when people had abandoned their landlines and were using their cell phones, and cell phone reception was so poor that in emergencies, like their grandparents having heart attacks and whatnot, they could not reach emergency providers. And I thought we at least need reasonable enough cell coverage that someone can call 911 expeditiously in this town. And I think we have achieved that, although after all these years of sort of sorting through this issue, I still have to use my cell phone outdoors. So, you know, go figure. So, you know, we'll see. We have some limited ability to review this issue again. And it's true, the telecommunication industry throws a lot of money around, especially up in Sacramento. There's a big bill that they pushed and that our Senator Nancy Skinner voted for, was something called SB 649, which the governor vetoed because he was the old governor, Jerry Brown, vetoed because he believed in local control. So, you know, let's wait and see. We'll have a much better sense for where we stand in another year or so. But I think, just speaking for myself as one council member, I'm sympathetic, but you know, I'm not really willing to spend a lot of staff time and taxpayer dollars on fighting lawsuits that we're going to lose, and we're pretty sure we're going to lose. So, you know, stay tuned.
Thank you. Councilmember Muss, any comments? Or?
Yeah, just a few thoughts. This is cell phones and cell towers and now 5G is something that I've been dealing with on this dais, either in planning and zoning or on the council for the last 14 years, one way or another. And I have to say, I have a lot of mixed feelings about saying yes to this tonight. I don't think we have a lot of choice. In fact, as far as I can tell, we don't have any choice in terms of the city. And it's regrettable. Personally, I wish there was a way to kind of slow the train down and take a look at some of these issues that people are most concerned about, health issues, et cetera. But you know, the fear of lawsuits is something that I think we do have to be cognizant of in a small city, and I don't think we're in a position to be fighting those off. You know, I don't know if there are long-term health consequences. I know some people feel that they are affected by this, and they may well be. You know, if there are long-term health consequences, we may not know that for another 20 years. And but there's a push for this to happen. I know it was sold to a lot of the country as this was going to bring rural America to the other side of the digital divide and give people in country situations a way to get on the internet, which they can't do now because there isn't the fiber optic cable, et cetera, that's out there, and this would be a cheaper, easier way to do it. It does seem like they're doing it here before they get out to rural America, and that's probably because they make more money doing it here. So I do have misgivings, but I think I will vote yes on this tonight because I really think we have a gun to our head in terms of cities. And I would like to think that there will be some benefits, and I think there will be some benefits, but, you know, it's not going to be me that can game faster on my cell phone. It'll be for another generation, I suppose.
Councilmember Pilch?
First of all, I think planning and zoning needs to see this item sooner than later, especially if they have to, if they will need to regulate based on this item. And we at least owe them that courtesy. So I'm still trying to figure out, I don't think I can vote on this tonight because I don't have enough information. I've just been kind of furiously Googling here about the allegation or the claims from one of the pieces of correspondence. And I did see that Mill Valley did pass a urgency ordinance. And I found an article saying that it bans these facilities from residential networks, but not residential neighborhoods, but not commercial neighborhoods. So I feel like I don't know all of the leeway we have here, and I feel like I want to know exactly how much leeway we have and use that leeway potentially before I vote on such an item. And while I am concerned with lawsuits, I'm not sure that I know that we are under pressure to allow these facilities anywhere in the public right of way. I don't have the legislation or the rules in front of me, so I feel like I need much more background to be able to vote on this. I'll at least abstain, if not vote no.
Vice Mayor McQuaid?
I think I agree with the other people up here that we're in a situation that we would all rather not be in. We fought this hard on the state level. I believe we fought it on the federal level. And then the FCC did what they wanted to do anyway. Hopefully, nothing lasts forever, especially in Washington. So we need to keep monitoring this. I like the idea somebody mentioned of having this a provisional, so it can be changed. I think it's important that, I feel like we have to do this. There's not really a choice, but I'd like to have it's not, once we change it, it doesn't mean that it's changed forever. If we can get the federal law to change, we easily can sort of change our course. I would like to see us increase our fees now if we're going to do this instead of waiting another 6 months. And I'm interested in, I know there are lawsuits that have been filed. I think it's important for us to follow those, whether it's other mayors, whether it's cities, whatever, and perhaps join in some of those and let our voices be heard that we're not happy with this and that we're sort of doing what we absolutely have to do, but we don't feel it's in our best interest. And the last thing I'll say is that this is another example that elections matter.
I just would like to be clear on a couple of points. One is, if we don't adopt this and someone comes in the near future seeking a permit, do we have the power to deny the permit given the higher level laws that exist? Once they file for a permit, the shot clock begins to run. Must we then issue a permit after 60 days?
If the application was consistent with federal law, then we would need to approve it because there's nothing else in the public right of way. There's nothing else on the city's books that would preclude that.
So the danger, if we don't adopt this tonight, we put ourselves at risk of having to issue a permit that perhaps doesn't meet some of these standards that we are adopting.
Right, this is increasing the rigor that we can look at an application in terms of making requirements for the aesthetics and the communication, the notification, all of that.
Yeah, so I hope that answers the question that one of our speakers posed, which is, why are we doing this tonight? Can't we slow this down? I think people need to understand that we are putting requirements on applicants that otherwise would not be on them. We are not permitting something that is not otherwise permitted. So that's one point. And the other was about the rigor. Are we being, apart from the fee, are we missing any opportunities for increasing or decreasing the impacts, I guess, on our communities? That is, I think we're all a little bit troubled. We've all received emails saying Mill Valley or, Sonoma or, some jurisdiction has taken a more aggressive stand on this issue. Are we, but I've also heard some of those might be older than the current regulatory regime. Are there areas where we have where we are requiring less than we can require that would help lessen impacts?
Well, we did make some changes tonight reflecting the letter that we received from AT&T, and then you saw they still weren't happy with all of our changes. So there is some gray area in determining what is clear and reasonable. A lot of their points related to how we were treating small wireless versus other facilities in the public right-of-way. So there, there's various things we could require everything to be underground. Well, they might say that's not very reasonable, where you're not requiring other facilities that are looking for an encroachment permit to be located underground. So there's a little gray area that we're navigating to try to encourage the best design that we can get within these facilities. I don't know if that helps.
Okay, no, that is helpful. Tell me if I'm characterizing it correctly, that we're reducing impacts as much as we can, consistent with not becoming a litigation guinea pig for the defensibility of the federal regime. And I think it would be a mistake for us to make ourselves that guinea pig. It would not only be bad for Albany, it might be bad for the overall cause. It would probably be a better thing for a city that's better positioned to launch, to really do a heavy-duty defense if they wanted to explore that.
That's a fair characterization of where we are. I mean, the goal of the staff has been to take advantage of as much flexibility as we possibly can under federal law. And there are a few areas where we've pushed the envelope a bit beyond AT&T's comfort level, but that's sort of not our problem, right? We want to do the best we can for the city in terms of preserving the city's ability to respond to applications. Where right now, if we receive applications, we're going to be under the shot clock and not really have standards to apply.
Yeah.
So that would be an unfavorable position to be in.
Okay, well then I'm satisfied that this qualifies as the gun to our head situation, as Councilmember Moss put it, and will support this.
Mayor, so I also agree that having guidelines in place and stricter standards is a good thing. So I see lots of references to cities that have had stronger measures. So let me ask a couple of questions, make sure I understand the facts as completely as I can up here. Do we know what it means that all these references to seeing Mill Valley having banned these facilities in residential areas?
I don't know what that means for Mill Valley, but I know the City of Albany in the zoning ordinance does have a provision requiring separation of a minimum of 50 feet from any property line abutting a residential use. So that's currently in Albany's.
That's currently on the books, but we could potentially change that on our books and have the separation be a different number, correct?
No, our interpretation is that the city really can't regulate geographic location, and part of
Okay.
at all.
Okay, that's your interpretation, yet I'm seeing things different in the news here, and that's what's troubling me. Well, that aside, so does the federal law distinguish between public right-of-way and private property in terms of the installations?
I mean, it does talk about private versus public, but in terms of location specifically?
Right, it looks like Ann might have an answer.
At a clarifying point, what's before you tonight was crafted specifically in response to a small cell order that came down in September of 2018. So for the purposes of what was prepared, we did it specifically in response to that, and that's why it addresses public right-of-way only.
Oh, and that ruling was about public right-of-way only?
Yes, it was exclusive to public right-of-way.
I see, okay, thank you.
And just as another reference point, we actually modeled this ordinance after the city of San Rafael, which was one of the first cities in the Bay Area to adopt small cell wireless regulations.
Yeah, I do see that reference as well, thank you. And does the federal law have any density limits for these installations? For example, say you got applications for 5 facilities in a block. Are there any, do the feds say anything about that?
I don't believe the order prescribes any specific restrictions related to a clustering of facilities. I think it's really at the carrier's discretion based on their network needs, where they propose to site small cells.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I wish I knew a lot more. If this ordinance, I mean, we can certainly, sorry, is this an ordinance? Okay, this is an ordinance before us. This ordinance can be revised and amended at any time, I assume.
Point that hasn't come up in this discussion, but I think given where the dialogue has gone, it's probably prudent to include a severability clause, which we don't have in the draft currently, but we could include and bring back to you for second reading.
Okay, yes, I think that would be very, very important. I hope my other council members agree. Pete, it sounds like you have a question about that.
Yeah, it's, so as I'm understanding what you're saying, our 50-foot distance that has to be between one of these facilities and a residence would still be intact?
It's still in Chapter 20.
It's still in there, but
It's just the city's not currently not enforcing it.
It's currently not enforced? But could we enforce this with, no, we could not. Okay.
By federal law. What the severability clause would do, and that wouldn't be part of the codified portion of the ordinance, but it would simply provide that if AT&T or Verizon or another carrier challenged the validity of some portions of our ordinance, such as the ones they've objected to, it wouldn't affect the remainder of the ordinance, even if they were successful.
Oh, okay.
Is that what you meant?
This is probably not quite what I meant, but that sounds like a good thing. But also, we are free to pass another ordinance or revise this part of the code at any time. Right, yeah, as usual. So given that, if it makes our case stronger, I guess I can vote yes for it tonight, but I sure wish I had a whole lot more information.
Vice Mayor McQuaid?
Do we have any applications pending?
No.
Do we know if we anticipate any?
We don't currently have anything pending. We had an inquiry maybe a year or so ago, but that never materialized. It was just a general due diligence, process.
It was sounding a year ago like Verizon was actively seeking to
Right.
move forward in Albany, but that seems, their interest seems to have waned.
Yeah, we haven't heard from them in quite some time.
So this is more of a technology question, but as they roll this out, do people presume that the old 4G and 3G and all the other Gs will go away? It'll eventually be just 5G? Is that the?
I'm not quite qualified to answer that, looks
Yeah.
like.
2G is gone. 3 and 4G are out there. The idea that they're ever going to put 5G in rural areas is a myth. It just doesn't make any sense. It does not work cost-wise in low population density areas.
Yeah.
So 4G will be with us forever for like probably freeway right-of-ways, rural areas.
But
5G, well, they've got to, if they're going to do 5G, they have to put this stuff up in residential neighborhoods just about, they don't want to get them too close because they can interfere with each other. But, it's like maybe every third telephone pole, there's going to be a lot.
Yeah.
And they will not commit to doing that lightly because it's a huge cost for them. And they just may decide we're not worth it. Who knows, how they do their cost calculations. But it's probably, you're going to see it first, I imagine, in big urban areas. Sorry for the preemption.
Oh, no, I don't know enough about the, kind of the historic technology and where we are currently, so that's helpful.
Councilmember Pilch?
Yes, thank you. Question for the city attorney. If we add the severability clause, are we able to still introduce this for first reading? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you can give direction to staff to draft that and bring it back at the second reading.
Okay. I guess I can introduce a motion unless there's more further comment. So I'll move that we introduce Ordinance 2019-08 for the first reading, amending chapter, I have to read it, Roman numerals, that's at 14. Thank you. Work on public property of the Albany Municipal Code with the direction to staff to add a severability clause to the ordinance. I would also like to direct staff as part of this motion to bring this this item to planning and zoning as soon as possible and to monitor future federal laws in case they allow us more flexibility.
Do you want to include the fee piece?
Oh, sorry. I'll take a friendly amendment. I don't know what that piece is.
Vice Mayor McQuaid?
I'll make an amendment or a friendly amendment that we include updating the master fee schedule now.
I'm okay with that part as well of the motion.
Do I hear a second?
That's my whole motion.
Thank
So,
you.
question for our city attorney. You're comfortable with piling on all this stuff in just one motion? We could do it in more than one motion.
That's fine. The severability clause, I would see as an amendment to the actual ordinance you're adopting. The remaining issues are really direction to staff that aren't part of the ordinance per se, but I think it's fine to include them as long as the council is comfortable voting on those as a group.
Could we have the motion read back, please?
Yes. So Councilmember Pilch moved to introduce ordinance number 2019-08 for first reading, amending Chapter 14, Work on Public Property of the Albany Municipal Code, with direction to staff to add the severability section and bring back to council for second reading, and to include updating the master fee schedule.
And then two more items to make sure that planning and zoning, to ensure that planning and zoning sees this ordinance as soon as possible, and to follow federal law closely in case cities are allowed more leeway in this matter.
I think, and litigation as well. Say, maybe follow the legal environment for opportunities to improve our ordinance.
That's fine too. Yeah.
Okay.
How about the resolution?
You might want a separate motion on that.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So there's a separate action recommended by staff to adopt a resolution establishing fee submittal, or application submittal requirements.
Okay, so we can vote on this now and then vote on the second one? Okay.
So do two separate votes. Okay, then let's have a roll call on that.
Oh, don't think
have
we
a
had a
second?
second.
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Barnes?
Yes.
Councilmember Moss?
Yes.
Councilmember Pilch?
Yes.
Vice Mayor McQuaid?
Yes.
Mayor Nason?
Yes.
And the motion carries.
And Councilmember Pilch, do you want to move the resolution?
Sure, I'll move that we adopt resolution number 2019-85, approving submittal requirements and conditions of approval for small wireless facilities in the public right-of-way.
Seconded.
Councilmember Barnes?
Yes.
Councilmember Moss?
Yes.
Councilmember Pilch?
Yes.
Vice Mayor McQuaid?
Yes.
Mayor Nason?
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you, and thank you to all who spoke and wrote in about this issue. So we go to our next item. We have no unfinished business tonight, so we go to number 12, new business. The first item under new business is approval of a policy for display of flags at city sites and facilities. May we have a staff report, please?
Okay, I'll go ahead and present this one. What you have before you is a draft policy for your consideration. It does two things. It basically summarizes and incorporates the policies and laws from both the state and federal flag display statutes. And those are pretty straightforward, things like the state flag flying below the U.S. flag and things of that nature, and the source of the flags themselves. The part of the policy that's unique to Albany deals with commemorative flags, and it basically authorizes the city to exercise its right of governmental speech by having the city council approve a display of commemorative flags on poles at city facilities. It has some detail in there, and this is all subject to the council's policy judgment as to what you think is appropriate. It provides that any request to display a commemorative flag must come from a member of the Albany City Council. It can be by way of a request from the public, but a council member would have to ask for it in order for the full council to consider it. It provides that the flags will be displayed for a period no longer than 31 days. Identifies certain facilities where flags might be displayed, City Hall, Albany Community Center, and other additional facilities if specifically authorized by the City Council. And then also provides that the flags would be displayed beneath the federal and state flags. So again, these are suggested policies for the council consideration. That part of the policy is up to you to decide whether you want to modify or approve it as is.
And I think we had a request for a modification to the policy from Councilmember Pilch. Do you want to?
I can speak about that right now. I had a little back and forth with the city manager about this. Might have been a misunderstanding of my intent. The intent was that if we do new poles, that we use these dark sky friendly lighting techniques, or that if we do a significant repair or replacement of a pole, we introduce this lighting. My intent was not to say that we need to replace all the lighting on all of our flag poles right now. Although that would be nice, but I think that's an item that I wouldn't want to burden the staff with. So that is my intention, and I had my suggested change was only dark sky friendly flag lights may be used on a new flagpole if the flag is to be lit at night. On significant repair or replacement of a flagpole, only dark sky friendly, well, let's say that 3 times fast. Only dark sky friendly flag lights may be used, replacing any non-conforming lights, period.
So,
thank you.
I've got a question about this. So are we being asked to consider adopting that kind of specific thing that you mentioned, that any request to put something up on the flagpole would come to council? Or are we adopting the entire 22-page flag display policy that was in our packet?
Well, really, the first 6 pages is the policy. The rest is attachments, which are just the federal and state laws. So you're adopting the proposal is to adopt the entire policy.
To do the entire policy. Well, the entire policy is huge, and there's a lot of stuff in that. And I mean, some of the things mentioned are. Oh no! Wait a second. This is
Looking at some of the attachments.
advisory body handbook. Is that what I'm looking at? It's 22 pages.
Yeah, I think you've got the wrong.
This was on my iLegislate.
Well, it's, in the binder, there's all kinds of things, including the Pledge of Allegiance that we violate.
I was going to say there's.
Yeah, I didn't put together the attachments, so I'm not, I think the attachments might be incorrect. It's supposed to be just the federal and state statutes on flag display.
Because there's an awful lot in there.
In fact, it's 2 pages is the policy, actually, from what I see. So it starts with section 1, purpose, ends with section 4, respect for flag.
So how did this other thing get on iLegislate? I'm confused. Thank you. I mean,
Trying to understand what 5G is.
If we had 5G, it wouldn't have happened.
I mean, this has very strong standards about how you put up the flag and take down the flag, and
It's all part of it.
I was thinking as I was reading this, who's going to do this at all of our community centers? I don't think it's going to be followed. Plus, what the Pledge of Allegiance should be, et cetera. Well, it's in your binder.
Yeah.
It's posted on the website. Do we need to refresh Granicus? Because the web link is correct.
Yeah.
I looked at it on Saturday, and I think I got the right thing on the website.
The website is showing.
Yeah, I have it up.
Yeah.
It might be the iLegislate was reloaded.
No, we always had, I don't know, maybe there was some cross on the attachment, but on Granicus, it's loaded with 22 pages. The first 6 pages is the policy, and then the next 14 pages is the U.S. flag code. Then the following 2 pages is the California state code on the flag section.
It's just 2 pages right here. So 1 and then.
If it simplifies matters.
So the rest of this is.
Yeah, if it simplifies matters, the attachments aren't really essential. I think the council's attention should be focused on the policy itself. And if it's cleaner to simply have a cross-reference to the federal and state law, then that would be sufficient as opposed to including the lengthy attachments, if that makes it cleaner and easier for the public to understand.
Well, are there other questions for staff so that we can take public comment before we begin discussion? Any more?
Let's see if I had any. No, that's sort of my basic one.
All right. Do we have any speaker cards? Does anyone desire to give public comment on this issue? Okay. Then I'll bring it back to council.
I just had one thing that I noticed that just didn't seem like it was an oversight, or it didn't quite read well, and it is that it does say that, let me see if I can find the page, commemorative flags displayed. Oh, you got it? Okay. Oh, no. Oh, thank you. Yeah, so section 2D, no, sorry, section 2(1)E says weather permitting flags should be displayed. And I thought that I wondered about should, and I thought what does should mean? Staff says that shall would be appropriate there. instead of should.
Section 2.
Yeah, Section 2, number 1, letter E. Said whether permitting flags should be displayed. Oh, they should, maybe they could be. I thought shall would be a little better. That's what staff suggests is shall.
Okay, sounds good.
That was one, and then I don't know, I don't think you've marked the other one, but the other one was just, it didn't quite make sense. The other one is same section, section 2, number 1, no, section 2, number 2, D. It's on the second page, yeah. Commemorative flags displayed, blah, 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 should be displayed in the last position of honor unless otherwise directed by the Albany City Council. But I don't think that's what we intend here, because the Albany City Council doesn't want to direct that the flag be displayed above the U.S. flag. I think that's just maybe a copy and paste error. Do you see what I mean? Doesn't quite make sense. So I think we could just strike the unless otherwise directed by the City Council.
Makes sense.
Okay, other comments?
I guess I'd get back to that other comment. Are we going to do this? I mean, I think it's a great thing to do, but is somebody actually going to go out there and put the flag up in the proper way every day?
I believe they probably already do, right?
We do? Okay.
U.S. and California flags. Well, I have a comment, and this is probably one of those ones where I'm an outlier. I am concerned that this opens the door to all kinds of unnecessary conflict and hurt feelings, especially on the part of people with very minority views. And I did a lot of reading before we proposed doing the pride flag, and I think that was really an exceptional, extraordinarily compelling case for government speech. My fear with adopting something as broad as this is someone's going to come in and want to have a flag like, the Israeli flag on Israeli Independence Day. And then the supporters of Palestinian rights are going to come in and say, no, that's a bad flag to fly. Let's not do that. And pretty soon we have the city council setting its own foreign policy. It also could become burdensome. I just see, and I've read about some of these, there was a town in Canada that decided to fly a pro-life flag, which was, of course, the political position of the vast majority, and the town adopted that as its government message. But you can imagine how alienating that would be to people who disagreed with that in either direction. In Albany, we'd probably be more likely to fly a Planned Parenthood flag on the 100th anniversary of the founding of Planned Parenthood or something like that. But you can imagine how alienating that would be to people in the minority on that issue. I just see this as having tremendous potential for mischief and waste and sparking conflict that doesn't need to be sparked at the local level. So I would prefer that we adopt a policy that declares what we're going to do with the United States flag, the California state flag, and the pride flag, and leave any additions up to future councils to decide, but not invite people to approach council members to ask for flags to be flown.
But aren't we doing right now, aren't we essentially saying, bringing those decisions back to us as opposed to people approaching staff and trying to pressure them.
Right.
Is what I think the situation is we have now, yeah?
Well, I think that staff is in a position now and would still be in a position after adoption of this to say flying flags is not really a staff matter. That's a matter for the council, and you should speak to whatever council member you think would be most interested in making your view the expression of the whole city. The only approach regarding a flag that I have received as a city council member was from the Tibetan community asking that a flag commemorating the uprising be flown. And while personally I'd be very pleased to fly that in front of my own house, I don't feel comfortable saying to people who disagree with that perspective that this is of such pressing moment to people in Albany that we need to deviate from our usual policy of striving to be the local government for all citizens, whatever their views on issues outside of our city's purview.
Sorry to say, I'm not swayed by that. I like the ordinance as written, or rules rather, and I think you can take any. Well, there's no fine line there. Any political decision we make can be alienated for anyone who doesn't agree with that decision. So, or any stance we take. So I like this as is, and I like the fact that it codifies something that's not codified yet. So I'm in favor of this. I do see your point, but I also don't want to limit our expression. I greatly appreciate, I do want to say I greatly appreciate my fellow council members for having flown the pride flag. And, but frankly, we were outliers in that. We flew it for 3 days where cities around us were flying it for a month. And so I'm happy that we did that, but personally, I don't think we need to be so conservative.
Well, I expected to be an outlier on this, so it doesn't bother me in the least, but I wanted to make that clear. Do we have, does anyone wish to make a motion or additional comments?
Is there public comment? Okay. Sorry. I thought somebody gave her a card. I'll make a motion. I move we adopt Resolution 2019-91 approving the proposed flag display policy in its current.
No, flag policy.
I'm sorry, what am I reading?
12-1, flag policy.
1991.
Right.
Approving the proposed, flag display policy?
Yes.
Okay. In its current form. Can I?
Would you accept the
Okay.
several changes we made here and my addition of the lighting amendment?
Yes.
Okay.
Could you get those in there without?
Yeah,
Okay.
we have it.
Yeah, I sent that, the text that I read to you, I sent it to the city manager already. Second that.
Thank you.
Councilmember Barnes?
Yes.
Councilmember Moss?
Yes.
Councilmember Pilch?
Yes.
Vice Mayor McQuay?
Yes.
Mayor Nason?
No.
And the motion carries.
And, I'm sorry, we go to the next item under this category of new business. And Vice Mayor McQuaid will give us a presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a proposed lighting policy and also a request for $6,500 of our council discretionary funds to implement lighting setup and installation. Keep in mind, this is not the policy. It is simply a recommendation for staff to develop such a policy. And I've thought about this for a really long time, and I think that, well, let me just read this. Obviously, I'm not a staff person. I'm not as good at this as you all are. Events, both local and global, as well as routine celebrations or observances, will be recognized by the City of Albany by lighting the tower at the community center with appropriate colored lights. This is a fitting way to engage our diverse community, celebrate successes, acknowledge patriotic events, or note global occurrences. And some of these examples could be, and not limited to, professional sports teams championships, local high school, Albany or St. Mary's championships, either athletic or academic, national holidays, global events, September 11th, Earth Day, various social causes. Lights will be turned on for significant events impacting the community. A specific list of events warranting recognition will be approved by the City Council, and lights will be turned on for a specific day or a maximum of 2 days. An example of, including, in addition to those listed above, would be things like Pride Day, child abuse awareness, bicycle safety, mental health awareness, suicide prevention, also colors of a nation suffering from a human or natural disaster. There'll be no lighting for political campaigns or personal events. No religious holidays will be observed. Council will determine the scope of the events and occasions to be recognized during the following calendar years by resolution at a meeting of the City Council each December. Some of these would be routine celebrations such as national holidays, and others will be lightings to recognize, as we said before, Pride Month, Bicycle Safety Month, Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and should correspond to a proclamation issued by the City Council. Community members may request lighting for specific causes by application to Council. These may be submitted anytime during the year and should correspond to an issued proclamation. And so I'm requesting $6,500 from the Council Discretionary Fund to support the setup and installation of the lighting project. And you can see attachment 2 gives 3 options, which Jeremy developed for us. Option 2 is the middle choice. It gives us a little more permanence to what we would be doing. We wouldn't be needing to set it up and take it down all the time. Well, you can see what the comparisons are.
Are there questions from the council?
I have some.
Sure.
I sort of think this is a good idea, but I do have questions because I'm not sure I totally understand it. Are you thinking that we're going to illuminate the pyramid on top of the community center, and that's where colors or whatever would happen?
Right, and we did do a test several months ago and put lights up there, and it was pretty effective.
I think it's great. I mean, so if the Giants win the series, it goes orange. If the A's
When the Giants win, it would be orange and black.
Yeah, orange and black, and the A's green and gold. I'm not sure what colors correspond with bicycle safety or child abuse. But
Well, there is a child abuse, like the ribbons. They kind of go with the ribbons.
Okay. Would you consider a 1B, which would be sort of between 1 and or 1.5 and 1 and 2, and that would be that we could maybe, I don't know what you did your sample with, but could you rent this equipment from one of the theatrical lighting places and put it up there and let us all kind of take a look at it to see how well that works? I don't really have a sense of, would you be able to see it, or?
I think, Nicole, we may not have exactly these lights, but we do have some lights that we could do a trial. Is that Is that correct? Jeremy's not here, is he? Jeremy.
It's at training.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what lighting we have. I'm more comfortable with option 2, to be quite honest with you, because it's less ongoing staff time. It's somewhat programmable, it's installed, there's less wear and tear on staff in climbing in places that aren't necessarily that climbable, so on.
Or Pete, were you just suggesting that you want to see it once before you approve?
I'd love to see it. I mean,
You just want to see that trial that Peggy saw and chose not to show us?
Well, the reason I chose not to show it to you is I'm not sure it's exactly what it would look like, and I can't remember now if we had other lights, and I didn't want to.
Take a photo or anything?
I did take some photos. I can send them to you, but I didn't want to be accused of bait and switch if what we had was bigger than what we would end up having. So I wanted to be sure that I was telling you the right thing. But I can email you the photos that we took that night.
The photos would be helpful.
But I think we should maybe just use those lights that we have and do a trial. I think we could get at least an idea.
Before we go to option 2, we can use our existing before we buy permanent?
Just as a trial, like one night, say,
Oh,
we're gonna put blue lights up on December 1st for no particular reason at 7 o'clock, if council come by and look. Nicole, would that be doable?
With some advanced planning, I think it'll take some installation, temporary installation to whatever Jeremy did last time.
We'd actually just put them on the floor and turn.
Okay.
But
Yeah, just so that we can plan his schedule a bit.
Any other
It's
questions?
International Blue Light Day.
Any other questions for Vice Mayor McQuaid before I take public comment? Do we have any cards? Do we have any public comment? We do not. Okay, so we bring it back to council. And I'd like to first myself express appreciation to Vice Mayor McQuaid and to Jeremy Allen for all the work they've done on this. And but I'm still going to be an outlier again, just because I have a feeling if I were not on the council and I saw this, my response would be, Albany's street lighting is so terrible. It's just so awful. And so far behind the times, and we're still struggling to figure out how to get that fixed and where the funding is going to come from and get that on schedule. And so I'm very reluctant to do something that involves lighting that does not contribute to the safety of the town. It just seems kind of symbolically wrong to me. And a related issue is, you know, the $6,500. It's not a great deal of money, but we are years behind on our financial reporting. We can be pretty sure we have the money, but we haven't looked at our audited financial reports only extend to June 30th of 2016. And I think that to add non-safety type expenses to the city's burden without even having that kind of reliable financial information just feels really troubling to me. So I'm going to be a no on this, but I don't want it to in any way reduce my respect for the work that has been put into this.
So is it possible to move on these items with the caveat that we will look at it, or do you want us to bring this back after we've looked at the lights?
It's up to the discretion of the council. If you'd like to take action to move forward with the recommendation, we're happy to do that. I don't know how essential a display would be at that point in time, because I think you'd prefer to see the nicer install, which is probably a different light quality.
Well, then I'll make a motion that we direct staff to develop a lighting program and authorize $6,500 from city council discretionary funds to implement lighting setup and installation as described in option 2. Is that sufficient?
Second.
Councilmember Barnes?
Yes.
Councilmember Moss?
Yes.
Councilmember Pilch?
Yes.
Vice Mayor McQuaid?
Yes.
Mayor Nason?
No.
And the motion carries.
So,
Okay, we're done with that. And we move with, to future agenda items. Do we have, does anyone have future agenda items they'd like to suggest? No? Then announcement of city meetings and events. These are listed on the agenda. I don't think we need to go through them. As far as adjournment, we have had a series of horrific shootings happening in schools, parties, and pretty much everywhere you can think of. And I suggest that we take a moment. I would also like to observe the passing of Angela Schwab Dunnican, who graduated from Albany High School. She was the widow of Officer Mark Dunnican of the Oakland Police Department, who fell in the line of duty, and she passed in a tragic accident in Northern California. Let's take a moment of silence to observe these unfortunate deaths. And with that, we are adjourned.
So you didn't consider a disco ball as part of it?
A disco ball in my backyard. It blew over the fence or something.
I think if we put one on top of the pyramid, it could
Just spin around. I hadn't thought of that.
And then
Wait, come back, come back.
You know, the spotlight that